Welcome to OTR Debate, our off-the-record podcast where three lawyers debate all things while managing to find out how it all comes back to the law. I'm Wee, I do contracts, and I'll be the judge for today's debate.
And I'm Mucci, and I do immigration. I'll be taking a side in this debate.
Okay, Mucci. I'm Lando. I'm a prosecutor. I'll also be taking a side in this debate.
Today's debate is on two manga and anime series that are named Chainsaw Man and Death Note.
That's correct.
Those are the names, yeah.
Kind of horror anime manga, you could say as well. Both kind of...
Both of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know much about Chainsaw Man. I'm representing Death Note in this debate. And for mine, it's kind of like a, detective-y kind of horror thriller kind of thing.
Yeah, mine's kind of adventure, horror, comedy sort of thing, yeah.
Comedy.
Mix of genres, yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, for the format of today's debate, it will be similar to most of our other episodes, starting with opening statements from both sides, followed by a couple questions from me, and closing statements, followed by the verdict. For today's debate, though, for the openings, I'd like both of you to kind of introduce an overview of your series, just for our listeners and viewers who are unfamiliar with each of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I can start if that's okay with you, Mucci?
It's fine.
Death Note is a smart, interesting anime that follows Light Yagami, a high school student who comes across a Death Note, which is essentially a notebook that comes down from the Shinigami realm, or like the Japanese equivalent of a Grim Reaper or a spirit entity from the Shinigami realm. He comes across a Death Note that belonged to a Shinigami in that realm. And essentially what the Death Note is that it's a notebook where if you write a person's name with their face in mind, and you write their true name with their face in mind, they die. So they die of a heart attack unless you write the manner of death. There's certain rules. There's a bunch of rules that follow, and they're used creatively throughout the show. So he gets this Death Note that's dropped down. And he gets delusions of grandeur. He's a really smart kid, and he starts thinking of himself as the god of the new world. He wants to get rid of all crime in the world, and as the show goes on, he accomplishes this, really. Throughout the show, he is being hunted and being tracked by a detective named L, this mysterious figure, L, throughout, and there's kind of a cat and mouse game going on between the two of them because they're both super, super smart. Light is doing all these things to avoid getting caught, and doing all these things that are super smart and planning and strategically to use this Death Note without drawing any attention to himself. Meanwhile, L is finding different ways to get closer to Light, I should say, and catch him and get rid of this person that has been named Kira. So it's super, it's a super good show to watch. Multiple episodes can pass by before you know what Light's plan is in using the Death Note, and just everything about it is just awesome, and it's a great show. And it was the first anime that I have watched, and after it, I haven't watched another anime, and I probably never will, because nothing will ever match up to that. Thank you.
Well, I don't know about that. I feel like there's a lot out there for you to see, but
no,
including Chainsaw Man, which is a manga series by mangaka Tatsuki Fujimoto. Began in 2018, although the English translation started releasing volumes in October 2020. So kind of during the pandemic, it was getting hype, getting praise on both sides of the Atlantic or Pacific or whatever, across the world, I should say. And so by October 2022, people were really excited for the anime adaptation, and began airing in October of 2022. Was done by this production studio MAPPA, who is responsible for some of the bigger anime of recent years, Jujutsu Kaisen and the last series of last season of Attack on Titan. And after 12 episodes, people are anxiously waiting for season 2. And it tells the story of this kid, Denji, who is probably one of the most unlikely of shonen protagonists. So whereas others have really lofty goals, like wanting to change the world or be the king of the pirates or to be the very best that no one ever was,
I caught those
Denji,
references. Don't know much, but I caught those.
Denji, though, just wants a normal life, just a normal life. He grows up in abject poverty, or you meet him in abject poverty as an orphan. His father has just died and has a enormous debt that he owes to the Yakuza. And so they're making Denji work for them to work off the debt, which he does by killing devils of various types. So this is a world where there are different devils that correspond to different things that people fear. The stronger the devil, it corresponds to something that people fear more. So, it's explained that like a coffee devil probably wouldn't be very powerful, but a gun devil would.
A coffee devil?
It's hypothetical. I don't think we meet the coffee devil ever.
Okay. Like a barista at Starbucks or something? Okay.
An angry barista.
Interesting.
But the gun devil will be very powerful. War devil, these are powerful concepts that people fear. And a lot of people fear them a lot, so they're more powerful because of that. So anyway, he fights these devils with the help of his own his pet dog Pochita, who is himself a devil. He's a little chainsaw. He has a chainsaw coming out of his head, and you can rev him up like a chainsaw, and he kills these devils. Within the first episode, though, this is how it starts. Within the first episode, Denji just says, "Hey, he wants a normal life. He wants, to eat good food and be in like shelter that's not raining on him and stuff like that." But he's killed by the Yakuza in that very first episode, and Pochita takes over his body, takes over his heart, and forms a contract with him that I will give you life if you show me your dreams. And Denji is then resurrected and able to then transform into the Chainsaw Man by pulling the ripcord in his chest, and that's where he goes from there. He becomes a devil hunter from there. So there's over-the-top violence, kind of horror violence.
Where did he get this dog from?
He met him when he was at his lowest point. I think it was right after the Yakuza said that, like, you have to work off your father's debt.
Him or the dog was at the lowest point?
He was, but the dog was dying.
Oh,
and so
both.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And Denji, you heal devils devils heal by drinking blood. So he gave him some of his blood, but said like, hey, you have to. This is a contract. We're gonna work together, basically. I don't remember exactly the in terms of their contract that he said at that point, but it was basically like, I'll give you my blood, and we'll work together to. But then Denji Pochita ends up becoming part of him, and allows him to transform into Chainsaw Man, which. When he pulls the ripcord in his chest, a chainsaw sprouts out of his head and 2 out of his arms, and it's this kind of over-the-top, like, violent thing, but also like a lot of humor to it, very funny. But then all of a sudden we'll get like incredibly devastating, and we'll like take all these left turns. Like you can never really predict where it's going to go from one episode to the next. Like especially once the big thing that happens in season 1 happens. So over time you have a series that. Depicts these concepts of love, whether it's romantic, platonic, unrequited love, a found family, what it means to have a fulfilling life, control and power. Okay, now I'm just naming characters, but at the end of the day, it might make you roll your eyes at first, but at the end of the day, give it a chance, and I think it will warm your heart and then break it.
I'm rolling my eyes now.
Well, prepare to have your heart warmed and broken. So jumping into the questions.
Can I get in? I know we normally don't do like a response to openings. I mean, that's not how it's done. But I do want to say, just so that I don't want our judge to think that Death Note is this older show and manga series that is irrelevant at this point. There was a Netflix movie adaptation with Light Turner, who is from Seattle, I believe, and the whole thing's kind of whitewashed, but announced as of July 2022, Netflix is going to try to remedy that and bring a live-action series. It's going to be the Duffer Brothers, the people that came up with Stranger Things, and that's a wildly successful show. They're going to be running that, but there's also going to be an executive producer and writer of the show that is apparently a big fan of the manga series of Death Note, So hopefully they'll do some justice. And, I've been saying it for a while now that they need to do Death Note justice. And hopefully they will. So just so Your Honor doesn't think that Death Note's irrelevant at this point.
All right. Thank you, counsel.
You're welcome.
So now jumping into the questions, my first one is, are there any key themes that kind of define your series, and what are some scenes that kind of illustrate those themes?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So I want to discuss a little bit more the found family a little bit down the line as a theme, but I want to talk about the storytelling in as much as it relates to like the subversion of expectations. So a few episodes in, there's a lot of crude humor, over the top violence. You might forget though that the first episode was pretty dark with not a lot of humor really. Denji has a sad, hard life. He's given away body parts and he's in all this debt. He's had to sell, literally parts of his body to, work toward that debt.
I don't know. How is he selling parts of his body?
He sold his eye. He sold, one of his testicles. So it's kind of, it's pretty dark. It's not very humorous at all in that first episode. But then by the second episode, he's like, there's a lot of crude humor. He's kicking his mentor figure in the balls. He has this goal. He decides his goal is that he wants to touch boobs. So it's not these lofty goals that you expect, but he hasn't had anything in his life. He wants some kind of normalcy or like what other people do that aren't in this abject poverty, living, day to day. So, but some darkness starts to creep in though in the background, particularly as we meet Himeno, who is a devil hunter who cares so much for her mentee, Aki, in part because all of her previous partners have died, and she can't bear to lose another one. And we also see Aki's tragic backstory of his whole family being killed by the gun devil when he was a boy. So this leads to episode 8, Gunfire, which begins as what appears to be just a kind of a character-driven episode. There was a little mini arc that had just wrapped up, so you think, okay, there's just going to be some character moments and whatnot. There is like a discussion about like a love triangle, and Denji and Himeno agree that she's in love with Aki, so he's going to help her with that, and he's in love with Makima, and Aki's in love with Makima. So they're forming a truce to kind of like try to like make that happen for both of them.
That sounds weird, but did he touch boobs at that point?
He had at that point, yes.
Oh, okay. Good for him.
In a really like kind of weird, but disturbing.
He achieved his goal.
Okay.
He achieved his goal.
Well,
but I will say,
when you preface
also,
it in a weird way,
it is weird. But the reason,
sounds non-consensual. At that
it was consensual. It was totally consensual. It was. I sounded like Trump there for a second, but it really was. See, where there is like where you would expect, we can talk a little bit about fan service in anime and manga, where it's not what you like talk about, like Thor's hammer appears in this. It's like fan service in the manga anime sense is like, attractive women and stuff like that, like and just flaunting and showing that kind of stuff off. But Chainsaw Man does, and you can say a little bit of that, but there is like every moment that might be like that is a little bit like disturbing or weird, or like there's like a commentary on it that is applied. Just watch for yourself and make that decision, I guess. But in any event, we're in this episode Gunfire, and so yeah, there's just discussion, and it's going to be like a pretty low key episode, and then suddenly in a matter of a couple minutes, like major characters die. They're literally gunned down all of a sudden, and then it just gets darker and more intense from there. And this, I think was where the anime itself really shines. Over the manga, it elevates it a little bit. There's like, there's just the use of the music and directing, the sound design, and the voice acting. Everything's really just firing on all cylinders in this episode. There's like just long points of quiet and very like disturbing like silence almost that really just makes you go like, where is this going and what is going on, and then ends on a cliffhanger, which we love.
We do love.
It just is a really, even now rewatching it, knowing what happens after, it just I think is could be one of the best episodes just singularly of anime that I've ever seen, because it still is shocking and like unexpected and still takes you on these twists and turns after knowing what happens.
All right. Death Note?
Yeah, so Death Note explores. Really, the whole show is just exploring the theme of justice, right? So the whole idea of Light getting this notebook, his whole idea is, I'm going to be the god of the new world. I'm going to make sure that there's no crime in the world, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to punish all the criminals. And you get to the point where it doesn't matter how petty the crime is. What he's doing is just he's exacting essentially vengeance to anyone that commits any kind of crime, so that everyone else can be aware that if you commit a crime, this is what's going to happen. You're going to fucking die. Like, you could, he makes it seem like if you jaywalk, you're going to die. To kind of get everyone else on the straight and narrow and just live in this new world of no one's committing crimes. So the theme of the whole thing is just, what is justice? What does it mean to the different characters in the show? Because, everyone else has a different sense of what justice means to them. So with Light, that's what that means. Like, he's going to exact his justice because he considers him a god, himself a god. Whereas with L, the detective, this genius boy detective that is trying to find him, justice is, he might agree with what Light is doing. And in some episodes, there's, he's doubting in himself. Like, do I agree with what he's doing? He is getting rid of murderers and rapists and everything. But at the end of the day, the justice is that he should be held accountable for this because he's a killer. There's members of the police force that are looking for him that, they question what is justice, and is Light, or Kira as they call him, because he's the killer of the world essentially, is he doing the right thing? A lot of people even on the police force are like, yeah, you know what, I kind of agree. The public starts to agree with all these things. He builds a cult following. And the one person in the show that has really like kind of the more that sticks to his values and morals the most is Light's dad, who is a detective on the Tokyo Police Department. He wavers a little bit, and there's a scene where he holds up like this TV show production at gunpoint, and he's like trying to stop something, and it seems really out of character. It's like a badass scene, but it's really out of character for him because his whole thing is, Kira is a killer. He's killing these people. It doesn't matter that they're murderers. It doesn't matter. They haven't been brought to justice because it's before they've had their trials. For some of them, some of them are broadcast on the news as suspects, and Kira is killing them. Some of them are also in prison. They've been convicted, but at the same time they're serving their sentence. So Light's dad, Kira's dad, is on the hunt for his son, and he's like that moral ground of he needs to be held accountable, and he doesn't really sway in thinking that Light is doing that Kira's doing what's right. Whereas even L, the person that's hunting him, has his doubts. So it's just a whole show about justice and what it means to everybody else. There is a prosecutor in the show that just turns into a fucking maniac, and just kind of becomes one of the cult members of Kira and just starts doing his bidding, which is just a wildly skewed version of justice in the criminal justice system. So it's just very interesting in that it shows everyone's vantage point and what they think justice should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. So the second question, I kind of want to get into, both of you have listed a lot of character names, and for myself and for people who are unfamiliar, I just like to get a little more detail on one of your favorite characters, not necessarily like the best or the main character, but someone that you really think has great powers, and just more details about them.
Yeah, I actually think we both might not want to focus on our main character as well, I don't know, but because they're both kind of,
my main character is awesome. I love the main character in the show.
I mean, Denji's cool too, but so
You gonna focus on the dog?
No. But what I first want to talk about is like this concept of a found family that I mentioned earlier. So of course Denji is an orphan. He's living in poverty in the beginning, and then he is given a chance at a normal life. And He's assigned Aki as his partner, who initially hates Denji, finds him dumb and unserious and having no real motivation. And then he's also, after that, paired up with Power, who is a fiend, which is a devil that took over the body of a dead person. And she's assigned to be his partner, and Denji finds her to be annoying and erratic and selfish. But they all are then made to live together. And over the course of living together, they start to form bonds and actually care for one another. And they have a very sibling-like bond as time goes on. And particularly with Power, and of course, I'm wearing a Power shirt right now. I was wearing it in a previous episode, but now you can actually see it.
That's right.
I love Power. She is, weird and annoying and brash and disgusting, but that is kind of what I like about her, because she's just so funny. She was actually inspired by Eric Cartman, which I read, which is just very funny. She's just not something
from South Park.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
Not a character you'd particularly see
the
as
resemblance.
Yeah. She's disgusting, apparently.
Yeah, she is. But initially we meet Power, right? And there is this is the person that promises that if Denji does something for her, she will allow him to touch her chest. So this is where he first gets to do that. And you see
consent.
With her consent.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
But you see Denji being motivated by these kind of lewd, sort of horny desires. That's his ambition, which is But when he finally gets to,
Does this show a hentai? A hentai?
Okay, it's not. When he finally gets to, though, he is oh, that was it. Oh, all right. And instead of viewing Power as in any way sexual at all, instead it's just this kind of platonic friendship that develops over time. Very close. They become very, very close, especially over the course of the manga. And it's not there's no will they or won't they kind of thing with the basically female lead of the show with any of the characters. Again, because she is just a vicious fiend who is, disgusting. But yeah, I think it works because she is, quote unquote cute looking, but she's also has all these other qualities that are because of her being a fiend and really being a devil, as that are not cute or whatever.
She's also a cartoon,
right?
Yeah,
but I mean, she's presented as cute, whereas you would see in other anime that person is fan servicey or meant to be will they or won't they with the main character or something like that. And then you see this friendship develop even to the point where they have their own side story light novel, Chainsaw Man Buddy Stories, which has on the cover Power and Denji making these goofy poses together. So it's just this really close friendship that develops that's really kind of sweet and nice over time. But I also want to shout out this awesome video essay I watched on YouTube. It's by Illumiloni, and it was called Chainsaw Man Subversive Shonen Women. So it highlights how, probably ironic considering how horny the main character is, but the women of Chainsaw Man are refreshingly nuanced and fully realized, and not just there for fan service type characters. So she analyzed the 4 main characters of the anime to date, and again, I want to highlight her analysis of Power, where she mentions that, she mentions that she's, outrageous, dumb, selfish, gross, but that's what she loves about her as well. And she goes on to say that typically when you have the 2 men and women in the cast, the woman will end up with one of the 2 guys, and this doesn't happen in Chainsaw Man, as Illumiloni. Yes, Illumiloni states she loves that they are platonic soulmates and nothing more. So I would recommend checking out that video because it was a really good dissection of the 4 main women of the cast and how they're refreshingly written and nuanced, which is somewhat unexpected considering the main character's early motivations, at least.
All right. How about your character analysis for Death Note?
So I love a lot of the characters. I mentioned Light's dad being that moral center and that moral stability to the show. But talking about L, the detective that's on the hunt for Kira, there's a great scene where he is... in the anime, obviously, he's already suspecting Light as being Kira. So, and it happens very early on. It's crazy how early on it happens, but he's already suspecting him because of his connection with the Tokyo Police Department, his dad being on the force, and the initial victims of Kira are, kind of around Tokyo, and so he's already suspecting him, and he's already kind of suspecting that, how it works, like the Death Note. He doesn't know that there's a Death Note at this point, but he knows that they need to know the name and face at this point. And the way that they meet is essentially he just meets them face to face. He's a student. They're like graduating. They're being accepted into college, and he's a top ranked student for whatever. But he gives them a fake name. He gives them like a pop star's name. So then Light has his face. He knows that he is L, the detective that's trying to catch Kira, because he tells him that. But he's kind of at the same time testing a theory of his, in that, is he going to kill off this pop star accidentally by thinking of this pop star's face when writing down this pop star's name, and then his theory of Light being Kira being proven, and then he'll be able to catch him at that point. So it's a clever kind of gambit here where he's willing to, again, going back to the whole thing of justice, he's willing to sacrifice these innocent people, this wildly popular pop star, to catch him and, stop Kira at this point.
Wait, didn't it turn out that he actually gave him the name of a criminal?
No, I
think,
think,
but he said it was a pop star.
It was
right?
a pop star. It was. I believe it was a pop star.
Man,
You might be right.
That
anyway, so a couple different scenes that I just want to mention, because it's a really good show in that it's to me it comes off as clever in that there's multiple episodes that lead up to what Kira's been doing. Sometimes they don't mention what he's been doing until it's finally revealed how his plan is all worked out. The biggest, I'll talk about a couple other ones, but. There's a scene where he is being watched. There's security cameras in his house because of L put them in there because he already suspected him earlier on. So he is watching the news, trying to find these criminals to kill off. Watching on the news inside a chip bag, a little TV monitor, and the camera's not catching that. All it's seeing is that he's eating chips and studying in his room. So he's watching the news, seeing all these criminals, and he's killing them off in this notebook, and no one's the wiser.
Unironically, the funniest part of the whole thing.
I know.
I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
Yeah, and kill them, and it's very dramatic the way that they do it with the music and everything. There's another scene where he's being tailed by the FBI, but he's not sure if it's an FBI agent. He suspects that the FBI is onto him. He then plans this kind of somewhat elaborate means of having some criminal hijack the bus that he's on a date while the FBI is on that bus, forcing this FBI agent to take action and stop this hijacker, or at least announce himself as FBI. He ends up, revealing that guy's an FBI agent. He also manipulates essentially everyone around him to get to his, ultimate goals. So the girls around him, he manipulates them, and he's a good-looking kid. He's a smart kid. He's like super athletic. He's like a golden boy. Everything he does is just good, except for killing all these fucking people. But
just the minor thing.
He thinks that's good. Yeah.
What he thinks it's good, and so he manipulates all these girls. My favorite being Misa. This she was a pop star. Mm-hmm. And
she looked like Jar Jar Binks.
She's hot. She's hot, and she's hot for him. So
she's a cartoon, right?
She is a cartoon, but she's hot. And he manipulates her, and she falls for him, and he's got no feelings towards her whatsoever. He's very narcissistic, and he uses everyone to his advantage. And so but getting back to one of the best scenes in the whole show, manipulating everyone, strategic planning on everything he does. There is a couple of episodes throughout the show where Light doesn't even have the Death Note anymore, and he's still able to pull the strings and find a way to have the people that do have the Death Note kill on his behalf, because as part of the rules for owning the Death Note, becoming in contact with a Death Note, if you touch the Death Note, you're able to see the Shinigami. If you have the Death Note in your possession, or you take ownership of the Death Note, you have your memory. You're able to do whatever you want to do on the Death Note. But if you relinquish the Death Note, then your memory's gone and you have no memory of anything that you've done or the Death Note or the Shinigami. So as part of his this wide plan is to, he's being watched. He feels like he's going to get caught at this point. So he comes up with a plan to get rid of the Death Note, relinquish ownership, but set it up so that eventually he's going to get it back. So it's a really great scene, a couple different episodes where we see Light Yagami in a whole different light, because the show pretty much starts right away with him turning into a maniac and narcissistic. But throughout these couple of episodes where he's got no memory of it, he is helping his father. He's helping Elle. He's more of an innocent character. You see his intelligence, and he does think, "Oh man, that could have been me. I could have been doing that. That does sound like something I would do." But he's a lot more innocent. It shows a different side of him altogether, where you didn't see from the beginning, and then it comes to like a satisfying conclusion in that story arc of episodes, in that he gets the Death Note back, and then everything comes back to him in an instant. He remembers everything. He remembers his entire plan, and then you just see this complete change in personality of him becoming this maniac again. And it's like some of the best show writing I've seen. It's like done perfectly. So,
and Judge, I wanted to I slipped over a supplemental brief to you just a moment ago, and I provided a copy to opposing counsel as well.
Yeah, I did the same thing actually, which is kind of funny because when we passed them over, they crossed, and I'm not sure if you've read either.
Not yet, but I see them.
Okay,
they're definitely there.
So yes, Judge, I know in preparation for this, I walked you through in my previous brief. I just sent you a link to Hulu to watch all of Chainsaw Man Season 1. But what just came out, in English at least, is Volume 12 of Chainsaw Man, the manga, which I would like to publish as Exhibit 1.
Granted.
Okay.
Well, there was over my objection.
There's an objection.
Yeah. I skipped that part.
He was publishing before he asked to publish.
But in any event, I would like to mention, though, as I was talking about compelling and well-drawn, well-written female characters, this character is new to the manga, not yet in the anime at all, and may not be for a couple of seasons. And this is Asamitaka, who is just like one of the best written female, like young high school characters, who is kind of like a loser, kind of a reject a little bit, and her internality and her dialogue just feels very well realized and well written. And he's gotten a lot of the mangaka Tatsuki Fujimoto has gotten a lot of praise for her characterization. She's actually kind of the main character of this kind of second part of the story, so it's not really focused as much on Denji. So yeah, she's really interesting, really well written.
Great.
And Judge, I also have an exhibit that I'd like to introduce into evidence as Lando's exhibit number 1. That is Death Note short stories. Mucci, I believe you told me about this, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It was on my Shonen Jump app.
Yeah. So this follows different characters. It's short stories. It's not within the Death Note initial manga. It's short stories after the story of Light and Elle and everything. So it's just various people that have the Death Note. From what I've read, it's pretty good. So take a read, Judge.
So before we get into our third question, I'd just like to invite all of you listeners and viewers to please follow us on YouTube, Spotify, give us some likes on Instagram and Facebook, and we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
So into the third question, the third legal question, which is tie your series into the law somehow.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned a little bit earlier the concept of contracts with devils. That's kind of how these devil hunters are able to utilize other devils to like help them. And for example, Aki gave up his right eye, or one of his eyes. I don't remember which one, but to be able to use the fox devil. And Himeno similarly gave like part of her body to be able to use her devil. There's one though where Aki, he has a sword that every time he uses it, it shortens his lifespan. and he uses it and is told that his lifespan is now dramatically cut short to like 2 years. So it's just like
Interesting.
right? Yeah. But it's like, how would these actually fare in like the real world as contracts? Well, like, you can't really have contracts for illegal things; those are void or voidable. So giving you parts of my body, like cutting off parts of my body or whatever to give to you, is not probably going to be allowed. And also, the concept of shortening someone's life by giving them certain power would probably violate the contractual requirement of definiteness, which promises that are indefinite, the intent to be bound by the contract may be absent. So, like, I agreed to shorten my life, but 2 years, I didn't agree to that. I agreed to shorten it by, half my life, whatever. But
half your life, you say?
Yeah. Like, what if I agree to shorten it by, I'll live another 25 years instead of another 50 years, whatever it might be. This is a young guy, because now he'll only live 2 more years. And then similarly, any contract with Denji, he's a minor. You can't have adults having contracts with minors, and I assume Pochita's an adult. He's been around for a long time. He's the hero of hell. So, like, adult with a contract.
Say a dog, though, right?
Yeah, but an adult dog devil.
Right. Time might work differently for Pochita, but
and in dog years too. So
exactly.
you never know how old he is.
He's definitely. So yeah, that's probably voidable by the minor to the contract. He can't be bound.
All right.
So I just want to get into, before I get into my side of the legal stuff, I just wanted to point out, because I did hear, a contract, shortening your life.
Contract with the devil.
The contract with a certain devil. In the world of Death Note, obviously, like I mentioned, you have to know the face and true name of the person before you're able to write them down and have them killed. So the Shinigami that gives you the Death Note or is attached to the Death Note does often try to make a contract with you to know the true name of a person, but it'll cut your life in half. So I mean, very similar. And Death Note did come out a little bit before Chainsaw Man, huh?
But Chainsaw Man is that's one of 50 million things going on there.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out there. That is something that they do. Mucci's already expressed all the stuff with the contract, how it wouldn't be, it wouldn't apply to U.S. court or any other court because there's just so many different issues. But one thing I wanted to talk about, because I saw a lot of talk about it on Reddit and different forums, how would, if L or his dad, Light's dad, were to catch Light, how would they go about prosecuting them, right? Like, how would that look? And in thinking about it, and I'm going to base this off of the Netflix version because that was based in the U.S. and in Seattle. If that were to happen, say they caught him and they're like, we got this guy dead to rights, we've got his Death Note, all the names appear to match, most of these people died the same way that's written in the book, would they be able to secure a conviction on this guy? Would it work? Like, how would they do it? And from everything I saw on Reddit and all those other places, people are like, that of course he'd be found not guilty because it makes no sense. Like, how could you tie this to him? And I agree, for the most part, not for the most part, 99% of the time, this is not going to work. There's no way you're going to be able to prove this shit. Any defense attorney is going to just straight out the bat, this is impossible. And, he could be just a student that's writing these names as documenting all these people that are dying. Maybe he's following the case. Maybe he's trying to catch this person. And in the beginning of the series, when Light is trying to test out the Death Note and see its parameters and see how it works, he writes people's names down and then writes a certain way they should die, but they don't die that way because it's impossible for them to die that way. Like, you can't have someone in Chicago die within a certain time frame in Tokyo. Like, they has to account for the time that it takes to get there and all that stuff. So they just die of a heart attack because if you don't write a probable or possible way, they'll die of a heart attack. So not even that could be accomplished and proven that that's the same way. But the way I was looking at this is that if he was caught and tried in a U.S. court, potentially a prosecutor that was a little bit, creative with how they're going to do this is they would, because Death Notes and, at least Shinigami are a part of Japanese culture, they could try to call someone that is an expert witness on, either lore or that portion of it, talk about the Shinigami, talk about what their role is, talk about what they do, all that stuff, and then introduce that Death Note that I'm sure, Light would be caught with, otherwise there'd be nothing tying him to it, introduce it into evidence as we did with our books, and just pass it around the jury. And then at that point in time, each one of the members of the jury would see the Shinigami, because as soon as they touch the Death Note, they would be able to see the Shinigami. And in the show, the Shinigami is either very forthcoming and helpful to certain people, or they're mischievous and not helpful. So depending on the Shinigami, they might say something to the jury. They might, that'd be kind of shady. You might have to do some motions eliminate or whatever. They probably can't even talk because that'd be testifying. But at least the jury would be able to see the Shinigami and may sway them into thinking, you know what, this isn't in the realm of impossibilities. This could actually be the case. Then there'd be some issues of, dealing with everything else and, they talking about the Death Note a little bit more. But that, I feel like, would be a way to get it closer to a conviction. Whereas, there's most likely this guy would get away scot-free.
Well, if you just try him in Japan, their conviction rate is almost 100%. So
yeah, and that's where the show was. So, they probably wouldn't even have to do the stuff I said.
All right. So moving on to closings. If you all want to give a brief, closing argument, please do so now.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I mentioned briefly music, and I wanted to talk about the opening and ending themes of Chainsaw Man, and because it's really a major thing in anime, like these Annie songs, these like really a great opening is like I think really treasured among anime fans. So we have Kick Back by Kenshi Yonezu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And not only is it a great theme with these like a lot of these movie references in the opening, like Pulp Fiction, Fight Club, Big Lebowski, which isn't really random because the mangaka like loves movies, is a big movie buff, and he always shouts out a movie generally at the beginning of each of the manga volumes. But it was even a hit. It was a big hit in Japan. It was a #1 hit. And even charted here at number 26 on the Billboard Hot Rock and Alternative charts, which is like really impressive. And my first night in Tokyo, I went to a bar where one of the people that worked there was singing it in karaoke. It was just very fun. But also, the ending themes, there are 12 different ones, one for each episode. And they're often accompanied with an ending sequence that's drawn in a different animation style. They're done by different directors. And it just has like a lot of variety to the show. There's like they'll show the characters in really like sometimes surrealistic or different ways. They'll hint at things that haven't happened yet and things like that in these closings that are like all have these like different style and flavor throughout the season, which 12 different closings is pretty crazy for one season. That's like something that like anime that are hundreds of episodes long probably do. But one that's only 12 episodes long, never really been done before. So it just shows this kind of like real uniqueness and energy and this kind of like clashing of like all different kinds of influences that are melded together in Chainsaw Man.
All right.
Okay. I'll keep it a little bit shorter than that. Since Mucci did mention the music to Chainsaw Man, I do want to just briefly mention that Death Note, the theme song and the opening song to Death Note, at least for the first 3/4 of the show, is amazing. It's a fucking banger, and like I was always jamming out to it. Then like towards the end, it kind of got a little heavy, and they start yelling about some shit, and like I'm not a fan of it. I wish they just stuck with the original one. But it's fun. It gets you going, and the whole like opening credits and opening theme to the show is portraying Light and L being in this chess match. The visuals are really cool that match up with the music, in that they're in this like cat and mouse game, this chess match between these two like high intellectuals that they're on a different level that nobody can compete on, but they're both competing. But apart from that, I just want to mention that attached to that is that this show it's essentially like a thriller detective kind of show, which I think is very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to how they handle it in a live action. I really hope I'm not disappointed like the Netflix movie that they came out with, because the anime is nearly perfect, and it's been shown in that it's been on the top. It's been listed as the top anime to watch. So with that, I say you should vote for or rule in favor of Death Note. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm not sure if that was any more brief than Mucci's closing. And I do hope that you are not disappointed in Netflix adaptation, because I think you will be disappointed with my verdict. And I'm going to go with Chainsaw Man.
Mucci,
I
I will say that you made it sound a little bit more interesting than the initial synopsis that I've read of it, and the initial impression that I get from it, because it just sounds insane. I've seen when we went to C2E2, I think there were
a lot of people dressed up as like Chainsaw Man characters. Yeah,
and it was insane, and it looks stupid, and I was like, this just makes no sense, because he doesn't even have a face, right? Like, how does he see?
He's got eyes.
He's a devil.
Okay, well,
but you did remind me though that Death Note's pretty awesome. I kind of was like,
I'm glad you
remembering all those notes. It's pretty cool. It's pretty great.
All right. Well, this has been OTR Debate.
Thank you.
Thanks.